What if there was a hidden point in the heavens, an invisible presence that reveals not only our deepest shadows, but our most forbidden powers? The sun, the moon, the planets, they are the obvious lights in the sky that draw our attention. They rule our calendars, our myths, and our sense of time itself. They're bright, luminous, impossible to ignore. They are the heavenly bodies that give us structure, but meaning comes from the darkness in between them. The ancients always knew that the seen is governed by the unseen. Light gives us the story that we see, but shadow tells us the story that we live. Beyond the moon's familiar orbit lies a shadow point, a geometric absence. Astrologers call it the Black Moon Lilith, but it's not a moon or a planet or even a heavenly body. It's actually the furthest point of the moon's path, the point where the lunar dance stretches into nothingness. And what it represents is nothing less than our most forbidden selves, the parts of us that were exiled, shamed, or demonized, but that never fully disappeared. I'm talking desire without restriction, intuition without permission, and power without approval. Lilith is not the darkness that we fear. She's the darkness that remembers. So before we get into the astronomy, we should probably meet the myth. The earliest textual and linguistic ancestors of Lilith come from Sumerian and Akkadian sources in ancient Mesopotamia. The word family, Lil, Lilu, Lilitu, appears in incantation and omen texts from roughly the 3rd millennium BCE onward. These beings were wind or night spirits, sometimes male, sometimes female, and sometimes specified as maiden spirits. They haunted fevered dreams, brought both lust and barrenness, and were carved on amulets meant to ward them off. Later, rabbis and mystics painted Lilith as a demoness, a killer of infants, and the consort of Samael, the archangel of death. And by the Middle Ages, she was Satan's bride. But in other hands, she becomes something else entirely, a symbol of autonomy, of exile turned into power, and of your shadow soul that refuses to vanish. Every culture tried to bind her name to its fear of the untamed feminine, and yet she survives in every story where exile becomes empowerment. But to call Lilith simply a feminist icon would be to narrow a very vast idea, because Lilith is not woman against man. She is the androgynous principle of consciousness reclaiming what was divided. And it's this mythic Lilith that astrologers have mapped onto the sky. So here's the astronomy. The Black Moon Lilith is not a rock floating in space. It's actually the apogee of the moon, the point in its orbit when it's farthest from Earth. It's math, not matter, a ghost point. But in astrology, ghost points can be powerful. Just like the lunar nodes which mark our eclipses, the Black Moon Lilith carries a symbolic weight that transcends its invisibility. And there's even a debate about this. Astrologers either use the true apogee, which wobbles quite a bit, or the mean apogee, which is an average. And the difference there is just philosophical. One captures the chaos of experience, and the other the illusion of order. Either way, we're just tracing an absence with gravity. Just like the lunar nodes mark where light is devoured during an eclipse, the black moon marks where certainty is swallowed by mystery. Let's take a second for the lunar nodes for those who don't know. So our moon doesn't orbit in exactly the same plane as Earth circles the sun. Her path tilts about 5 degrees, and twice in every orbit that tilted path crosses the sun's path. These crossing points are called lunar nodes, one ascending where the moon rises northward through the ecliptic, and one descending where she sinks southward again. Astrologers have studied these invisible intersections for thousands of years, and when the sun and moon meet at a node, light is swallowed, and then we have an eclipse. In astrology, the north node, which is sometimes called the dragon's head, can't make this shit up, symbolizes the direction of growth and destiny, while the south node, the dragon's tail, represents past patterns and comfort zones. Together they trace the soul's evolution, the eternal dance between what we cling to and what we're meant to become. And they're not celestial bodies, just points in space defined by geometry, and yet they've shaped entire systems of meaning. And in my experience, I have a little, they're always weirdly accurate. And that is what prepares us for the Black Moon Lilith. Another invisible point that, like the nodes, exists only in calculation, but carries an enormous symbolic gravity. Some say the moon is not just a mirror of sunlight, but a veil, an interface between worlds. In Gnostic myth, the soul descends through the spheres of the planets, each ruled by an archon that tests its awareness. And the final gate before incarnation is the moon. And at the furthest reach of the moon's orbit, at the place where it is most distant from Earth, lies the Black Moon Lilith. To mystics of the world, that edge would be the limit of the lunar realm, the point where the illusion of the third dimension begins to thin. Lilith becomes the spirit that refuses to sleepwalk through the archon's dream. She stands in the doorway, exiled and yet awake, reminding us that our freedom begins where our obedience ends. In the modern mythos of the Saturn-Moon matrix, Saturn is the architect of time and order. The moon reflects and repeats its signal. In classical occultism, Saturn governs limitation, time, matter, and the boundary of the visible cosmos. It's the planet of crystallization and control. The moon rules reflection, rhythm, memory, and repetition. It governs the cyclical nature of incarnation and emotion. Together, the two create a feedback loop between structure, Saturn, and reflection, the moon. A self-perpetuating system that keeps consciousness revolving through predictable patterns, physical, psychological, or societal. Metaphorically, it represents conditioning, cultural programming, and the echo chamber of thought. But the black moon, the lunar shadow, marks a glitch in this broadcast. It's the frequency of refusal. It's the moment when a human being realizes that the cage is just made of cycles. It's that moment of awakening when consciousness can finally perceive its own conditioning and then make the choice to step beyond it. And in Kabbalistic language, the black moon is the dark reflection of Yesod, the lunar foundation of the tree of life. Yesod is the luminous lunar realm, the interface between spirit and matter, the place where thought becomes form. It channels and reflects all the energies of the upper Sephirot into physical manifestation, much like our moon reflects sunlight. In later Jewish mysticism, specifically the Zohar and medieval demonologies, Lilith becomes the other side of this same sphere. She's linked with Gamshikoth, representing distortion, illusion, and uncontrolled desire. And where Yesod shapes dreams into reality, Lilith reveals their inverse, the unspoken desire, the shadow impulse that drives creation. And Lilith does not walk alone. Her partner is Samael, the fiery intellect, the venom of God. And together they rule the shadow side of the tree of life, mirroring every holy Sephirah. Their union is the marriage of mind and desire when both have forgotten their true source. The intellect that condemns, the appetite that consumes. But to the mystic, even this infernal pair is not evil, only the half-light of creation, which demands integration. And so, whether you speak the language of Gnosis or of Saturn's control grid or of the sacred tree, the meaning is the same. The Black Moon Lilith marks the boundary between control and freedom, ignorance and knowing. She is the last veil of awakening and the first breath of rebellion. Now, to understand how to use the Black Moon practically, we must first remember that the psyche is its own cosmos. Every planet, every orbit, every shadow point out there has its own reflection within us. The ancients said that the human soul was a microcosm of the heavens, and Jung called it the objective psyche, a universe that dreams through us. And so in this interior sky, the Black Moon is the point of furthest exile, the point where the self drifts farthest from its own light. It's the lunar apogee of consciousness, the place where the familiar world goes faint and we begin to hear the pulse of the unconscious. In Jungian language, Lilith is the anima in her unintegrated form, the wild feminine that the rational mind cannot domesticate. She is Eve before apology, Sophia before repentance, and Persephone before her return from the underworld as the spring. In the alchemical process, she is Negrito, the blackening, the necessary dissolution of certainty before any transformation can occur. To meet her is to enter the psychic eclipse, the moment when the light of ego is swallowed by the deeper night of the soul. And those who look at that dark night and consider it destruction will probably turn back. But those who keep walking will call it initiation. It is the exact same trial faced by Orpheus when he descended into Hades to retrieve Eurydice. The poet was told that he could save his one true love from death on one single condition: that they not look backwards before they reach the world of the living. But, of course, Orpheus did look back. He was drawn by doubt, by longing, and by the refusal to trust what he could not yet see. And because of his lack of faith, he lost his one true love to death once more. In the language of the soul, that backward glance is the moment that we refuse our own transformation. It's the fear that makes us cling to the known when the known has already died. The Black Moon is the unseen voice in that tunnel behind Orpheus whispering, "Keep walking, don't turn around." For if you can walk through the underworld of your own making without demanding proof of light, you will emerge not as a lover, but as awakened. Manly P. Hall once wrote that the soul must pass through the dark night of matter before it remembers the light of spirit. And in that sense, Lilith is not the adversary of divinity, but she is its midwife. She is the descent required for our ascension. She's the spiral path that leads not upward, but inward. The Hermeticists taught that all things seek reunion in their origin. The sun must return to its own heart, the breath to its own silence. The Black Moon teaches the same, that what is cast out must one day be invited back. Every repression creates its twin in shadow. Every unspoken truth waits, patient, until consciousness is strong enough to hear it. And in this way, this exile becomes the guardian of your authenticity. Psychologically, we meet Lilith every time we say no when we're taught to say yes. Every time we choose truth over belonging. She appears in therapy rooms, in art studios, and in the sleepless hour when the mask finally slips and the raw voice of the self begins to speak. In Hermetic cosmology, every ascent begins with a descent. The initiate descends into the shadow world not to worship the darkness, but to retrieve the fragments of light buried there. And that is the Lilith work. integration through confrontation. And so in astrology, her placement marks the house where we must reclaim our power, where shame becomes silence, and that silence must become a song. And in collective terms, it's the voice of every truth once condemned as heresy, every body deemed impure, every wisdom burned and buried. Lilith is history's repressed memory returning as a revelation. The black moon is therefore not an omen, but an instrument. It points to the place in your astrological chart and in your psyche where the soul demands wholeness. And she asks only one thing of us, that we stop pretending to be smaller than we are, because when we dare to integrate her, the energy people told us was destructive becomes creative, erotic, and visionary. The forbidden becomes the foundation. The moon, once only a mirror, becomes a doorway. The darkness will become your teacher, and the soul, once divided, will begin to remember its own completeness. The church called her a demon. The poets call her a muse. But for the mystic, we know her as necessity. For without confrontation with shadow, there is no transformation. The serpent does not threaten paradise. It completes it.